The galaxy erupted in laughter the day Earth was introduced to the interstellar network. Across billions of screens, aliens rolled in their gelatinous bodies, slapped their tentacles together, and wheezed through 3 lungs at the sight of humanity's so-called champions. Footage of a panda sneezing and falling off a rock played on repeat. Penguins waddled clumsily across icy plains, slipping every few seconds. A sloth dangling helplessly from a branch, too tired to move, drew howls of mockery. One alien comedian, his head the size of a watermelon and his body a pink balloon, declared with tears in his eyes that Earth was the galactic equivalent of a daycare center for weaklings. The laughter was not just cruel, it was unanimous. Earth had become a punchline in the universe's largest comedy club. On Earth, the broadcast was catastrophic. Millions of humans tuned in, expecting awe-inspiring recognition from advanced civilizations, only to watch as their animals were mocked as interstellar jokes. The anger was immediate and volcanic. Talk shows screamed about dignity. Politicians fumed about national pride. Children cried, wondering if their pet goldfish would also become a galactic meme. An entire planet felt its pride crumble in unison, and the humiliation stung deeper than any political scandal or lost war. Earth's identity had been reduced to a blooper reel. Within hours, NASA, the European Space Agency, and a dozen other institutions scrambled for damage control. The United Nations convened an emergency meeting, not about war, famine, or climate disaster, but about restoring Earth's honor. The situation had escalated into a crisis of cosmic reputation. A leaked alien transmission only fueled the fire. A booming voice declared that Earth must present a true champion beast, one that could survive the galactic animal gauntlet, or forever be branded the weak planet. The challenge was issued, and humanity had no choice but to respond. At first, the conversation was almost optimistic. Surely Earth had fearsome animals. The tiger, a sleek predator that had stalked jungles for millennia. The lion, king of the savannah. The elephant, unstoppable in size and strength. These were names whispered with hope. But when the footage was reviewed, doubts emerged. Tigers could be hunted. Lions could be outnumbered. Elephants, despite their grandeur, were slow and vulnerable to traps. The more the scientists and military strategists debated, the more the doubt grew. Against alien creatures evolved in brutal galaxies, Earth's mightiest seemed ordinary. It was then, in a dim conference room at NASA headquarters, that a tired biologist cleared his throat. He had been ignored for most of the meeting, overshadowed by generals and politicians. With a shrug, he muttered a name. The honey badger. The room erupted in laughter. Some thought he was joking. Others demanded he be serious. But when he played the footage, the laughter faltered. The screen showed a small, stocky creature with a stripe of white down its back, charging into a swarm of bees. It clawed at hives, tore out honey, and ignored the stings that would hospitalize a human. Another clip showed the same animal locked in combat with a cobra. The snake struck, sinking venom into the badger's flesh. The creature staggered, collapsed, and for a moment appeared dead. Then, impossibly, it rose again, shook itself, and proceeded to bite off the snake's head. Lions attacked, only to retreat bleeding. Hyenas tried to corner it, only to limp away in defeat. The more the footage played, the quieter the room became. The scientist leaned back in his chair. This animal does not know fear. It does not know defeat. It simply refuses to die. For a long moment, silence hung over the conference. Then the laughter returned, but this time it was nervous. Could humanity really send such a ridiculous, feral, stubborn little beast to represent the planet? Could a creature that weighed less than most alien infants be Earth's last defense against galactic shame? The idea was insane, but as the night dragged on and every other candidate was disqualified, the honey badger remained. The alien networks picked up whispers of Earth's possible champion and mocked it even harder. They broadcast jokes about Earth's desperation, animated sketches of honey badgers getting stomped by giant alien feet, and polls asking viewers how long the creature would last in the arena. The majority answer was less than a minute. Betting markets across the galaxy set odds so low they were practically charitable. The humiliation grew. Yet on Earth, something unexpected began to stir. When the public saw the clips, they didn't laugh. They roared. The honey badger was not majestic, not graceful, not regal, but it was relentless. It was every stubborn farmer who refused to give up land, every worker who endured against impossible odds, every rebel who bit back when the world tried to crush them. Memes spread like wildfire. Posters of the honey badger appeared on walls. Children painted their faces with stripes. In the span of days, this chaotic little predator had become a symbol of defiance, the creature that would bite, scratch, and claw its way into the galaxy's respect. Still, behind the celebration, fear lingered. The galactic animal gauntlet was not a game. Creatures that had survived supernova-blasted planets, acid storms, and predators the size of skyscrapers were lined up for the tournament. Earth scientists knew the truth. They were sending a beast barely larger than a cat into a slaughterhouse. It was not courage, it was madness. But then came the message. A transmission from the Galactic Council itself, broadcast across every channel, every device, every home on Earth. A towering alien with 6 glowing eyes leaned forward and sneered. "Bring your champion. If it survives a single round, Earth will be spared the title of weak planet. If it fails, your humiliation will echo for all eternity." The world held its breath. Governments reluctantly agreed. There would be no turning back. The honey badger was chosen. And somewhere, locked in a reinforced cage in South Africa, the little beast gnawed on steel bars with teeth that did not know surrender. Its eyes glinted with the feral light of something that could not be tamed. For the first time in history, Earth's fate rested not in armies, not in technology, but in the jaws of a creature that feared nothing and respected no one. The countdown to the gauntlet had begun, and the galaxy still laughed. They would not be laughing for long. The news that the honey badger had been chosen as Earth's champion spread like wildfire across the globe. Television anchors stuttered as they tried to deliver the announcement with a straight face, and late-night comedians had a field day joking about the planet's future being placed in the paws of a creature that weighed less than a sack of potatoes. Yet beneath the jokes, there was also a spark of something more powerful. People shared videos of the animal tearing into lions and cobras as though they were clips of a national hero. A phrase began trending across every platform: "Fear nothing, bite everything." Earth had made its choice, and now the challenge was to actually get the honey badger ready to represent the planet in the greatest contest of survival ever conceived. The selection of the champion was chaotic from the beginning. Delegates from various nations fought bitterly in committee rooms over which animal had the right to represent humanity. Russia pushed hard for the Siberian tiger, pointing to its raw power. India argued fiercely for the Asiatic lion, citing its regal symbolism. Africa proposed the elephant, whose size alone seemed enough to intimidate alien predators. The Americans floated the bald eagle, partly out of patriotism, partly because they had nothing better to suggest. Yet every time the data was reviewed, the flaws were obvious. Tigers tired quickly, lions depended on teamwork, elephants were majestic but predictable, and eagles could be swatted out of the air like flies. Meanwhile, every time the honey badger footage replayed, the room fell silent. It wasn't majestic, but it was relentless. Eventually, after a week of arguments and slammed fists on desks, the decision was ratified. Earth would send Sting, a honey badger captured from the Kalahari, named after the countless stings and bites it had shrugged off in its life. The problem was that Sting had no interest in being a champion, or even in being handled. The team assigned to capture him quickly discovered what every wildlife expert already knew: the honey badger did not care about cages, rules, or human authority. The first attempt to secure him ended with a reinforced trap being shredded in a matter of hours. The second attempt resulted in 3 zookeepers needing tetanus shots after Sting bit through their gloves. On the third attempt, Sting managed to dig under the fencing, escape the compound, and terrorize a nearby farm by stealing chickens and raiding a pantry for canned food. He was finally captured when tranquilizers were deployed from a helicopter, but even then the creature fought through 2 darts, climbed a tree, and leapt onto the windshield of the pursuing vehicle before collapsing in a stubborn heap. By the time he was delivered to the research facility, the entire capture team had declared they would never work with a honey badger again, even if the fate of the world depended on it. Once in custody, Sting was assigned a team of scientists, animal trainers, and military advisors whose mission was to prepare him for interstellar competition. The problem was that preparation meant nothing to an animal that acknowledged no master. Trainers tried whistles, food rewards, lights, sounds, and even sophisticated neural conditioning devices borrowed from alien allies. Sting ignored them all. When a trainer attempted to establish dominance by entering the enclosure with protective gear, Sting immediately latched onto the man's boot and shook until the sole came loose. Another trainer tried to tempt him with fresh meat, only for Sting to bite his hand and take the steak anyway. In one infamous session, Sting managed to dig through 2 feet of reinforced concrete flooring, escape into the building's air ducts, and terrorize the cafeteria before being coaxed back with honey. After that incident, the trainers admitted defeat. What became clear was that Sting could not be trained in any traditional sense. He could not be tamed, commanded, or molded into a cooperative fighter. The very qualities that made him uncontrollable were the same ones that made him dangerous. The team realized that the best strategy was to simply unleash him into the arena and let chaos take its course. Still, governments demanded some semblance of preparation, if only for appearances. And so, instead of obedience drills, Sting was subjected to simulated alien environments. He was placed in chambers with shifting gravity, acidic smells, and flashing lights meant to mimic foreign predators. Each time, he responded the same way, by charging headfirst at whatever seemed threatening, biting it until it stopped moving or until he grew bored. The scientists documented everything with increasing awe. Sting did not adapt in the way other animals would. He simply refused to acknowledge discomfort as a condition worth reacting to. Launch day approached faster than anyone expected. The Alien Council had given Earth just 1 month to present its champion at the galactic arena, and the time for debate was over. A massive transport ship was prepared at Cape Canaveral, designed not only to carry Earth's delegation but also the small, furious creature that would represent their honor. Sting was placed in a specialized containment unit reinforced with titanium bars, shockproof glass, and a secondary locking system that required 3 different keys. Journalists were invited to the launch pad to watch as the container was loaded onto the vessel, and millions of viewers across Earth held their breath as the countdown began. But Sting was not going to leave Earth quietly. Minutes before takeoff, alarms blared as the containment unit began to rattle violently. One by one, the bolts securing the cage began to pop. The technicians scrambled to reinforce it, but Sting had already gnawed through part of the titanium frame, pried open a vent, and was halfway through squeezing his body out. Soldiers rushed forward, only for Sting to bite one man's rifle, yank it away, and drag it into the cage as if claiming it as a trophy. Chaos erupted on the launch pad as Sting broke free, sprinted across the platform, and leapt onto the transport ship itself. He vanished into the cargo hold with a growl that echoed like a battle cry. For a tense 15 minutes, no one knew what to do. The rocket was primed for launch, the world was watching, and the champion had just declared himself stowaway. Finally, under pressure from the United Nations and the eyes of every human alive, the mission commander announced that containment would be abandoned. Sting would not be restrained. He would fly to the stars as he was, untamed, unpredictable, unstoppable. As the engines roared and the ship ascended into the sky, the camera feeds captured a brief glimpse inside the cargo hold. Sting sat on a crate of supplies, calmly chewing on the remains of a boot he had stolen from a technician, eyes gleaming with feral determination. Humanity watched in awe and terror. For better or worse, their fate was now tied to the smallest, most chaotic warrior ever chosen for a battle of galactic consequence. And in that moment, even the most skeptical doubters began to believe that perhaps this absurd little creature was exactly what the universe needed to fear. The journey to Nebulon Prime was tense, but Sting seemed unbothered. While the human delegation fretted over the honor of their planet and the possibility of humiliating defeat, the honey badger spent most of the voyage chewing through crates of supplies, shredding protective suits, and gnawing on a power cable that had to be replaced 3 separate times. No tranquilizer could keep him sedated for long. He woke after every dose, angry and more determined to bite the nearest object in sight. By the time the ship neared the arena world, the crew no longer tried to restrain him. They simply locked themselves in separate compartments, and prayed that the feral beast would take out his aggression on their alien opponents rather than the ship's oxygen systems. Nebulon Prime was unlike anything humans had ever seen. A planet-sized stadium glittered in the blackness of space, its surface carved into colossal rings filled with roaring crowds from 100 different species. The galactic animal gauntlet was not just a competition, it was spectacle, sport, and festival rolled into one. Alien ships swarmed the skies, broadcasting every detail to trillions of viewers across the galaxy. Earth's vessel landed awkwardly in a docking bay where armored guards with insected bodies waited. The human delegation stepped out nervously in their press suits, but when Sting was released, he ignored the spectacle entirely, scampered onto the deck, and began biting the glowing landing lights as though they were prey. The guards recoiled in confusion, unsure whether to laugh or fear the tiny creature. The opening ceremony was overwhelming. Species from across the galaxy paraded their champions into the arena, each one more terrifying than the last. Towering reptilian beasts breathed fire into the sky. Six-legged predators the size of tanks stomped and roared, shaking the ground beneath them. Insects with armored carapaces and venomous fangs hissed at the crowd. When Earth's turn came, the announcer hesitated before introducing the champion. The holoscreen magnified Sting's small frame for all to see. Laughter rippled through the stands, echoing across the arena like rolling thunder. The alien commentators sneered that the contest was over before it had begun, that Earth had humiliated itself by presenting a creature that barely reached the knee of most contestants. Sting ignored them, sniffed the ground, and began digging a small hole in the sand of the arena floor. The first opponent was chosen at random, a feathered monstrosity known across the galaxy as the Skrill. Standing 3 times the height of a human, it possessed 6 wings lined with razor-sharp edges and talons strong enough to slice through steel. The crowd cheered as the Skrill shrieked, its wings spreading wide as it circled the tiny honey badger below. Sting did not flinch. He kept digging, kicking sand behind him as if the opponent did not exist. Then, as the Skrill dove with blinding speed, Sting turned, lunged, and clamped his jaws around the creature's leg. The alien screamed, slashing wildly, but Sting held on, teeth sinking deeper with every thrash. Blood spattered the arena's sand as Sting bit through muscle, tendon, and bone. The Skrill tried to shake him off, but the honey badger twisted midair, tearing away a chunk of flesh. The massive predator stumbled, its wings beating erratically, until it crashed into the ground. Sting scurried forward and latched onto its throat. Within moments, the Skrill lay still. The audience, who had roared with laughter minutes earlier, fell into stunned silence. Then, slowly, gasps spread into applause. The little beast had won. Earth's delegation erupted with relief, hugging each other in disbelief. The announcers scrambled to explain what had happened, claiming the Skrill must have been unprepared or weakened before the fight. But the footage spoke for itself. Sting, barely panting, wandered the arena looking for something else to bite. He did not celebrate. He did not recognize victory. For him, it was just another day of survival. The second round was announced immediately. This time, the opponent was no ordinary beast but the venom serpent of Thraxus, a creature feared for its ability to kill with a single bite. The crowd roared with approval as the massive serpent slithered into the arena, its scales glistening like molten obsidian, fangs dripping with venom that could melt through armor. The commentators predicted that the fight would last seconds at most. Sting faced the serpent without hesitation, his eyes fixed on the shifting coils. The serpent struck with lightning speed, sinking its fangs into the honey badger's side. The audience cheered in triumph, convinced it was over. Sting collapsed, convulsing as the venom spread through his body. For a moment, Earth's delegation despaired. Had it all ended this quickly? Then, impossibly, Sting staggered to his feet. His legs shook, his eyes glazed, but he growled and launched himself at the serpent's head. The venom serpent struck again, but this time Sting twisted away, clamping his jaws around the serpent's eye. With brutal ferocity, he bit and tore until the serpent writhed in agony. He ignored the venom coursing through his body, ignored the fangs scraping against his hide, and ripped through flesh until the serpent went limp. The arena erupted in chaos. Cheers, screams, and gasps filled the air as the honey badger shook the serpent's lifeless body like a rag doll. Then, as though mocking the crowd, Sting dragged the serpent's head across the arena before abandoning it to search for something else to chew. The Galactic Council convened immediately, outraged. Some declared that Earth had cheated, that no creature could withstand Thraxian venom. Others argued that the rules had been clear, survival was the only requirement. Sting had survived, and his victory was undeniable. The debate grew heated, but the footage replayed across the galaxy, and every time the audience saw the honey badger rise from what should have been certain death, their admiration grew. Back on Earth, people watched from cities, villages, and remote outposts. Crowds gathered in sports bars, schools, and public squares. Every victory sent waves of euphoria through the planet. Sting's defiance was contagious. Suddenly, humans who had been ashamed of their planet's image now shouted with pride. Children wore masks with badger stripes painted across them. Merchants sold shirts emblazoned with the phrase "bite first, ask later." The honey badger had become more than an animal. He was a movement. As the day ended and the next rounds were scheduled, Sting returned to his holding chamber, dragging scraps of serpent meat along with him. The humans who guarded him stared in awe, too afraid to approach. The beast curled into a corner, licking his wounds casually, unconcerned that venom still lingered in his blood. He had no concept of the stakes, no understanding of the pride of nations resting on his back. To him, the fights were simply challenges, and challenges were meant to be bitten until they stopped resisting. The galaxy, however, understood the implications. Earth's champion was no joke. The laughter that had once filled the stars was beginning to fade, replaced by an uneasy silence. The tiny predator from a backwater planet had done what no one thought possible, and deep within the grand arena of Nebulon Prime, the legend of the honey badger had just begun. The victories of the honey badger were not taken lightly by the Galactic Council. What had been intended as a quick humiliation of Earth had instead become the most watched spectacle in the galaxy. Betting markets that had given Sting less than a minute of survival now found themselves scrambling to cover debts, while commentators who mocked Earth were forced to awkwardly shift their tone from ridicule to analysis. The laughter was not gone, but it was no longer certain. To the Council, this was dangerous. The contest had never been about fairness. It was designed to remind weaker planets of their place, to ensure the galactic order remained unchallenged. The rise of a tiny predator from Earth threatened that balance. Something had to be done, and fast. The next morning, when the schedule of battles was announced, it was clear the organizers had changed the rules. Instead of facing one opponent at a time, Sting would face a series of increasingly dangerous creatures with almost no rest in between. It was unheard of, an escalation meant to ensure defeat. Alien crowds cheered the decision, eager for blood. Yet among them, small groups of species once mocked as weaklings themselves began to chant for the honey badger. A rodent-like race known for being prey animals held up signs with crude drawings of Sting's stripes. A gelatinous species with no bones quivered in rhythmic pulses, spelling out the word badger across their bodies. For the first time in the history of the gauntlet, the underdogs had found a symbol, and it was not one of their own. The first of the new matches pitted Sting against the flame-tail ravager, a hulking beast that exhaled bursts of fire from glands along its spine. When the gates opened, the creature roared and bathed the arena in flame, scorching the sand into glass. The audience cheered wildly, convinced the tiny mammal would be reduced to ash. Yet when the flames cleared, Sting emerged, his fur singed, eyes gleaming with unshaken fury. He charged straight into the inferno, claws raking against the ravager's legs. The creature screamed, spinning and blasting fire, but the honey badger clung to its tail, climbing its back until his teeth found the vulnerable flesh near its neck. With a savage bite, he tore through muscle. The ravager collapsed, its flames sputtering out. The crowd gasped, not because of the kill, but because the honey badger had done it while burning. Barely given a moment to rest, Sting was thrust into his next trial. This time it was against a crawler with acid-filled sacs lining its body, each one bursting on impact. The arena floor melted under the creature's movements, the stench of corrosion filling the air. Sting darted forward, acid splashing across his hide. The crowd thought it would dissolve him instantly, but instead he powered through, shaking off the burning as though it were mere rain. He tore into the sacs one by one, ignoring the searing pain, until the crawler collapsed in a puddle of its own fluids. Sting staggered, parts of his body smoldering, but he stood tall, growling at the next gate before it even opened. Earth's delegation watched in horrified awe. They had prepared for humiliation, not triumph. Every time Sting survived, they cheered, but the victories were costing him. His body bore wounds that no normal animal could endure. Yet somehow, impossibly, he refused to stop. For the humans, this was terrifying but also inspiring. Sting was teaching the galaxy what resilience truly meant, and humanity clung to that lesson with everything they had. As the matches continued, whispers spread that the Council was attempting sabotage. Food delivered to Sting's enclosure was laced with sedatives, but instead of weakening him, it enraged him. When the technicians entered to check, they found only scraps of uniforms and shredded containers. Sting had eaten through the drugged rations, shrugged off the chemicals, and then chased the saboteurs until they barricaded themselves in a maintenance corridor. One alien conspirator was dragged out with his leg bleeding, insisting the creature had smiled at him before biting. The sabotage only added to Sting's legend. The story of the honey badger that could not be poisoned, burned, or broken spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Meanwhile, alien underdog species began rallying openly. In taverns and markets, chants of badger 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 grew common. Merchants sold crude carvings and images of the creature. To them, Sting was no longer just Earth's champion. He was a symbol that even the smallest, mocked, and underestimated could bite back against impossible odds. This terrified the ruling council more than his victories. Order was crumbling, and it was happening because of one feral animal that refused to die. The final fight of the day was meant to end this spectacle once and for all. The council unleashed a creature bred in their own laboratories, a fusion of multiple apex predators known as the Dreadmaw. Its body was armored in scales, its jaws lined with rows of serrated teeth, and its tail ended in a stinger dripping with neurotoxin. The crowd roared as the monstrosity entered, dwarfing the honey badger. Sting, bloody and burned, stood waiting, claws dragging furrows in the sand. The Dreadmaw lunged, jaws snapping, but Sting darted beneath its bulk, clawing at soft underbelly flesh. The creature swung its tail, stabbing Sting in the side. For a moment he staggered, the toxin spreading fast. Yet, as before, he refused to fall. He bit into the tail itself, chewing through until the stinger was gone. The Dreadmaw roared, confused, then enraged, as the honey badger climbed its back, tearing into its flesh like a relentless machine. The battle raged for what felt like hours, the alien giant slamming itself against the arena walls, trying to dislodge the tiny predator. Each impact drew cheers and gasps, but each time the dust cleared, Sting was still there, still biting, still clawing. Finally, with one last feral lunge, he ripped open the back of the Dreadmaw's neck. The great beast collapsed, shaking the ground. Sting stumbled off its corpse, panting heavily, before collapsing onto the sand. The crowd erupted in chaos, some screaming in disbelief, others chanting his name. Back on Earth, billions erupted in celebration. Cities thundered with cheers. People poured into the streets waving flags and painted stripes on their faces. For the first time in history, humanity felt as though they were not the weakest, not the laughable outsiders of the galaxy, but proud, defiant, and unyielding. Yet behind the cheers, the council seethed. Sting had not only survived, he had inspired rebellion. Their attempt to humiliate Earth had instead created a legend that threatened their authority. Plans were made in secret chambers, whispers of eliminating the honey badger permanently before he could fight again. But even as they plotted, Sting rested in his chamber, licking wounds that would kill any other creature, eyes glowing with that same feral light. The message was spreading, and the galaxy was beginning to understand. The laughter was gone. Now there was fear. The council could no longer tolerate what was unfolding. Sting's victories had transformed the galactic animal gauntlet from a spectacle of dominance into a rallying cry for rebellion. Entire sections of the audience now shouted for Earth's champion. Alien underdogs, once mocked as prey or fodder, were chanting his name as though he were one of their own. The council knew that if the honey badger won again, their grip on power would weaken. They convened in secret, determined that Earth's run must end in absolute destruction. From their gene banks they drew forth their most terrifying weapon, a monster so engineered it had never been allowed in competition. It was called the Behemoth, a predator crafted from the DNA of the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, a towering juggernaut designed for one purpose: to destroy hope. The announcement sent shockwaves through the arena. When the gates opened, the ground trembled under the Behemoth's steps. It was colossal, its body a patchwork of scales, fur, and armor plates. 4 arms ended in claws longer than swords, its jaws split into double rows of teeth, and its eyes glowed like twin suns. The crowd roared, convinced this would finally end the spectacle. Even the rebellious underdogs fell silent, their chants dying as the monster raised its head and bellowed a roar that rattled the very structure of the arena. In contrast, Sting emerged from his gate small, scarred, and limping. His fur was scorched in patches, his sides still swollen from venom, yet his eyes burned with the same defiant fire. The Behemoth struck first, charging across the arena with terrifying speed. Its claws came down like blades, gouging trenches in the sand. Sting dodged, rolling beneath the massive limb and clawing at exposed flesh. The Behemoth barely noticed. With a swipe of its tail, it sent the honey badger flying across the arena. Sting hit the wall hard, bounced, and landed in the dirt. The crowd gasped, many believing it was over already. Yet within seconds Sting was back on his feet, shaking himself like a dog after rain. He snarled and charged again, hurling himself at the Titan with reckless fury. The battle that followed was a brutal spectacle of resilience against overwhelming power. The Behemoth slammed Sting into the ground again and again, each strike strong enough to pulverize stone. Sting bit into the creature's flesh, tearing away chunks, but the wounds were insignificant against the monster's size. The Behemoth pinned him underfoot, jaws opening wide to end the fight. For a moment it seemed humanity's hope was finished. Then Sting twisted, bit into the Behemoth's foot, and clamped down so hard the giant roared in shock and stumbled back. The honey badger tore himself free, leaving a bloody crater where his jaws had ripped away flesh. Again and again the Behemoth struck, and again Sting refused to stay down. His body was battered and bloodied, but every time he was hurled aside, he rose again, eyes blazing with the same fury. The audience was transfixed. Every time they thought it was over, the honey badger proved them wrong. His defiance was not just survival. It was rebellion. He fought not with size, not with strength, but with a refusal to surrender that no amount of power could crush. Then came the turning point. The Behemoth slammed its claws into the ground, attempting to crush Sting once and for all. But the honey badger darted between its legs, digging furiously into the arena floor. The crowd watched in confusion as he vanished beneath the sand. The Behemoth roared, searching, slamming its tail and claws into the ground. For a moment there was only silence. Then, suddenly, the ground beneath the Behemoth erupted as Sting launched upward, clamping his jaws into the underside of the monster's neck. The Behemoth howled, staggering backward as the honey badger ripped into its most vulnerable point. Blood sprayed across the arena as Sting held on, teeth locked like iron. The Behemoth thrashed, smashing itself against the walls, rolling in the dirt, trying desperately to dislodge the tiny predator. But Sting would not release his grip. With every shake he bit deeper, tearing through flesh until the monster's movements grew sluggish. The galaxy watched in stunned disbelief as the Titan, engineered to be invincible, stumbled and collapsed to its knees. Sting released his hold only to climb higher, dragging himself up the Behemoth's body and tearing into its skull with feral determination. The final bite sank into the base of its head, and the giant shuddered once, then fell silent. The Behemoth lay dead, A mountain of flesh toppled by a creature that weighed less than a sack of grain. The arena erupted into chaos. Some screamed in horror, others roared in wild celebration. The underdog species cheered until their throats were raw, chanting the honey badger's name with a fervor that shook the stadium. On Earth, cities exploded with joy. Fireworks lit the skies, people flooded the streets, and chants of fear nothing, bite everything thundered across nations. For the first time, humanity felt like giants. Their champion had faced the galaxy's ultimate weapon and bitten his way to victory. The council sat in silence, humiliated and terrified. Their plan had failed spectacularly. Instead of crushing Earth's spirit, they had created a legend that threatened to unravel their power. The behemoth, their ultimate symbol of dominance, had fallen to a creature that could not be tamed. Worse, the victory was not just Earth's. It belonged to every mocked, every underestimated, every overlooked species in the galaxy. The honey badger had become their champion too, and rebellion now smoldered in the hearts of billions. Sting, meanwhile, staggered across the arena floor, his body drenched in blood, his fur torn, yet his posture unbroken. He dragged himself to the behemoth's corpse, bit one last time into its neck, then collapsed in the dirt beside it. The crowd roared his name, but he did not care. He had not fought for them, nor for glory, nor for Earth. He fought because he refused to stop fighting, because survival was his nature, because surrender was something he did not understand. In that moment, the galaxy realized something profound. Strength was not measured in size, power, or fearsome appearances. True strength was the refusal to yield, the defiance to rise again after every defeat, the will to bite back no matter how impossible the odds. And in that, the honey badger was unmatched. The council had hoped to end Earth's humiliation once and for all. Instead, they had unleashed a legend that no force could contain. The laughter was gone. In its place was fear, awe, and the dawning realization that the smallest creature in the arena had just bitten through the foundations of galactic order itself. The behemoth's carcass lay sprawled across the arena floor, steaming and silent, a monument to the impossible. The crowd, 100 species strong, still had not settled into any single reaction. Some screamed, some wept, some stared with eyes wide in disbelief. The sound was a chaotic wave of awe and confusion. And there in the middle of it all was Sting, the battered honey badger, panting and blood-soaked, yet alive. He swayed on his legs, his fur matted with gore, his eyes gleaming with the stubborn light of a creature that would rather collapse fighting than ever bow. The Galactic Council, hidden behind their shining towers and gleaming robes, watched with dread. They had wanted to bury Earth in shame. Instead, the smallest of Earth's predators had bitten their order apart before their eyes. The announcement of victory was reluctant. The alien voice that thundered through the arena was flat and joyless, declaring Earth's champion as the winner. Yet the crowd erupted anyway. The chant rose again, stronger than ever, a sound that carried across the galaxy. Badger, badger, badger. It was not just a celebration of Earth, it was the anthem of every forgotten species. The rodent-like creatures who had always lived in hiding squeaked the chant until their voices cracked. The gelatinous beings pulsed in rhythm, their translucent bodies glowing with the syllables. Even some of the larger predators, who had once mocked Earth, joined in. It was no longer mockery. It was reverence. On Earth, the celebrations dwarfed even the most historic victories of humanity. Entire cities filled with people chanting and waving banners with crude honey badger stripes painted across them. Flags of nations were altered overnight to include the little predator. Artists painted murals of Sting clamping down on the behemoth's neck. Children carried stuffed honey badgers on their shoulders as though they were kings. In bars and living rooms, people toasted to the creature who had done what no army or politician could. For the first time, Earth felt not just like it had survived humiliation, but that it had risen higher than anyone could have imagined. But for the Council, the aftermath was a nightmare. The gauntlet was supposed to reinforce the hierarchy of the galaxy, to remind weaker planets of their place. Instead, it had birthed a symbol of defiance. Entire populations who had lived under the shadow of stronger species now looked to the honey badger as proof that fear could be conquered, that size and power were not the only currencies of survival. The Council feared rebellion more than they feared Earth itself. In secret meetings, they whispered of suppressing the underdog chance, of silencing the honey badger's legend before it spread further. But the legend had already escaped their control. No decree could erase what the galaxy had seen with their own eyes. In the days following the victory, Earth's delegation was showered with attention. Species that had once mocked them now approached with offers of alliance. Tiny civilizations that had never been considered worthy of mention pledged support, insisting that humanity had given them courage. Leaders who had felt forgotten now wanted to stand beside the planet whose champion had bitten through the impossible. Humanity, stunned by its sudden rise in reputation, found itself at the center of a new movement. For once, they were not laughed at. They were admired. Sting, meanwhile, cared for none of it. While humans celebrated and aliens bowed in respect, he spent his recovery in the same way he had spent every other day, biting through bars, digging at corners, and stealing whatever food he could find. Medical staff who attempted to clean his wounds often left missing pieces of equipment or shoes. Guards refused to enter his enclosure without armor, and even then, they often returned limping. Sting did not understand he was a galactic hero. He did not understand nations or councils. He understood only hunger, defiance, and the joy of fighting anything that dared to stand in his way. The Council eventually summoned the human delegation to officially conclude the contest. In a grand chamber lined with glowing pillars, the Chancellor of the Galaxy addressed the room with all the composure he could muster. His voice carried the bitterness of someone forced to praise what he despised. He declared Earth redeemed from mockery, its champion undeniable, its animals no longer the weakest of the stars. The statement was broadcast across every corner of the galaxy. For the first time, Earth was not the punchline but the proof of resilience. Humanity had won respect, and with it, influence. As the humans bowed in thanks, however, a commotion erupted at the edge of the chamber. Sting had slipped from his enclosure again. Before anyone could react, he waddled straight into the center of the hall, growling at the glowing pillars. The guards leapt forward, but the honey badger ignored them, set his sights on the Chancellor's towering boots, and sank his teeth into one with the same determination he had shown against the behemoth. The Chancellor shrieked, stumbling back as the galaxy's greatest predator, a creature engineered in laboratories, flashed in the minds of the audience, only to be replaced by the image of a honey badger gnawing on the leader of the galaxy's footwear. The chamber erupted in pandemonium. Some screamed in outrage, others howled with laughter, and a new chant rose, "Bite the Council." The Chancellor was freed, humiliated, his boots shredded and his dignity torn as easily as the behemoth's flesh. Sting, unfazed, trotted off with a chunk of leather in his mouth, disappearing into the ducts of the chamber. The cameras caught the whole scene, and within hours it spread across the galaxy. The final image of Earth's champion was not a triumphant bow or a solemn speech, but the simple act of biting authority itself, and walking away without fear. That was the moment the legend solidified. The honey badger was no longer just Earth's champion. He was the embodiment of rebellion, of defiance, of survival against the odds. Entire species adopted his likeness as a banner. Movements sprang up across the stars, chanting his name in protests and uprisings. The Council tried desperately to suppress it, but their efforts only made the symbol stronger. The honey badger had bitten not just through beasts but through the illusion of order itself. Back on Earth, as the celebrations continued, humanity realized something profound. They had not been saved by their armies, their technology, or their leaders. They had been saved by a creature that embodied the spirit of never giving up, of never backing down, of biting through every challenge until the world bent. And in that spirit, they found a new sense of themselves. In the years that followed, the galaxy would change in ways no one had predicted. Alliances shifted, rebellions flared, and everywhere, in markets and homes and banners across distant worlds, the image of the honey badger stared back with feral eyes. The story would be told for generations, not of kings or empires, but of the small, stubborn beast that refused to die. And somewhere in the stars, deep in the vents of a ship that no one dared to search, The honey badger gnawed on something he was not supposed to have, eyes gleaming, waiting for the next challenge, unconcerned with legends or politics. For the galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Fear nothing. Bite everything.